time, we saw that one possibility for Lechem Mishnah on Erev Pesach this year, right, which is Erev Shabbos, was by using what's called matzah ashira, which we generally refer to as egg matzah, which is made either with fruit juice or with eggs, honey, etc., but no water. And clearly that works. Well, I shouldn't say clearly, because we'll see that the Ramah may disagree. That works for the first two meals, which can be eaten before Zman Bitul Chametz. However, what about Sudash Lishit? What do we eat for Sudash Lishit? So according to the Mechaber in the Shulchan Aruch, and therefore Sfardim ve'edot HaMizrach, there's no problem, because one can eat matzah ashira until the 10th hour. 10th hour of which is Shaz Manit, which means 2 hours before Yontif begins, or 3 hours, the 10th, the 11th, whatever, when he has to stop eating, Kadeshi Kanes Lachag B'Te'avon, so that he'll be hungry to eat the Korban Pesach, or to eat at the Seder, so that he will eat matzah when he is hungry for it. The Ramah seems to paskin differently with regard to Suda Shlishid. However, the Mechaber says the following. The Mechaber says, just give me a moment. Yud Daled, Shechol Yot b'Shabbat, when Erev Pesach occurs on Shabbat, says the Mechaber, Suda Shlishit, when do I eat Suda Shlishit? Zmana Achar HaMincha. I eat it after the time for Mincha. Ve'az Eino Yochol Lasos Lo B'Matzah V'Lo B'Chometz Elo B'Matzah Ashira. I can't eat matzah because I have to Kadeshi Yikonos Lachag B'Te'avon, that he desires matzah. The only thing, and I can't eat chometz, right? Because it's already after this man of achilas chometz, says the Mechaber. Elam b'matzah ashira. I should eat egg matzah. V'tzarach la sosa kodem shoasiris. And he should eat sudash lishit before the 10th hour, because the balance of the day he should not eat, so that he will have an appetite for the Seder, or in the Zman of the Migdal, she would have an appetite for the Korban Pesach. On that, says the Ramah, Haggah, Ubemedinot Elu, which means Ashkenazic Jewry, She'ein Noagin Lechol Matzah Ashira, where our minhag is not to eat egg matzah, Kiddelakaman Simotov Samach Bey, that's him, Yekayim Suda Shlishit, we don't eat matzah ashira because it is not the minhag of Ashkenaz to eat matzah ashira seemingly on Erev Pesach, and therefore your yotze suda shlishit by eating fruits or some meat or some fish, also in the same time frame that the Mechaber talked about. Okay. So the Aruch HaShulchan is troubled by what the Ramah has to say, because if you remember last time, we said that matzah ashira is chometz nuksha, means that it's not fully made, it's hard matzah, it's hard chometz, etc., etc., and chometz nuksha is not aser on Erev Pesach. So the Aruch HaShulchan is troubled by what the Ramah is saying, is that I can't eat it, Erev Pesach. So he says the following. V'nira she'ein hakavana degam be'erev Pesach ein le'achol matzah shira lefi haminhag. Says the Aruch HaShulchan, yes, the minhag among Ashkenazim is not to eat matzah ashira on Pesach. But that doesn't really relate to Erev Pesach. There ain't shum tam b'zeh. There's no reason not to. Because even if it's chometz nuksha, it's mutter on Pesach. It's not awesome. Ella, so how does he reinterpret the Ramah? Ella hakavana, kivan she'ein min hagenu lechol bepesach matzah ashira. Says the Aruch HaShulchan, since among Yehudei Ashkenaz, it is not the minhag to eat egg matzah during Yontif, Mimela ein mechinen etzleinu matzah shira. The Ramah is just reciting the Metziut, what really happens. If I can't eat matzah shira all Yontif, I'm not going to make matzah shira. I'm not going to buy matzah shira. So therefore, I won't have it. So what do I do when I don't have it? Right? Mimela ein mechinen etzleinu matzah shira. Ulachin rak al sudash lishit ein derech bnei adam lahatriach al machal kotan kazet. And to say, well, I'll make a little bit for shalashudas, people aren't going to do that. So says the Ramah, eat something else for shalashudas, because memelo you're not going to have matzah shira, because according to the Aruch HaShulchan, because we don't eat it over Pesach. So I'm not going to go out and buy a box of matzah shira just to have Erev Pesach. So figure out something else to eat, okay? His take on this is not the only take on this. The Nod Yehuda understood, interestingly, that the Ramah Aserd forbade eating matzah ashira all of Erev Pesach. And I shouldn't say all of Erev, until Sof Zman Achilas Chometz on Erev Pesach. And he says the following: Ubemet ma'od ani tamal Ramah. I'm very surprised with what the Ramah is saying. Dal kol ponim, in any event, l'shum deya leka benuksha shash isut Torah be'erev Pesach. There's no shash of it being chometz d'oraisa on it, right? V'lo machashash b'dava shehu d'rabbanan l'deya yechidit. And only according to one daya, it's not exactly right. There are two dayas, it's the Rashi and the Ravid, right? Yechidit, why are we concerned about a das yachid, a solitary opinion? He das Rashi. Neged rov poskim hakadmonim, who is in opposition to almost all the other poskim. The Ilmale, shekva hore rosh hamorim, but for the fact that Ramah already paskin that, li'isur afilu be'erev Pesach, that matzah ashira is also even on Erev Pesach, hayiti matir matzah ashira kol hayom be'erev Pesach. If you would ask me before I saw the Ramah, I would say, what's the problem? Eat matzah ashira all of Pesach, all Erev Pesach. V'al kol panim ani moreh, notwithstanding what the Ramah seems to be saying. You have to remember what I'm reading. The Nod Yehuda lived substantially before the Aruch HaShulchan, so he didn't see what the Aruch HaShulchan wrote. Okay, the Aruch HaShulchan is a later posek than the Nod Yehuda. So he says, "V'al kol ponim," notwithstanding what the Ramah said, "Ani mored ad chatzot hayom," I am paskening that until midday on Erev Pesach, afilu l'Ramah, even those who want to understand that the Ramah asks it, mutar matzah ashira, you can eat egg matzah until the middle of Erev Pesach. Ulefi masha kasafti necha, the suda shlish is manar achar chatzot. However, in other words, what the Ramah said for Suda Shlishit makes sense. Why? Because I'm only saying you can eat it up until midday, and the Ramah says by definition Suda Shlishit has to be after day, so you have to eat peyrot, basa, dogim, or something. L'chein hechmir rabah afilu b'matzah ashira. L'chein nira lefi aniyas de'atim siyuma de paska. What's the bottom line? This is one way to say it. The unterste Shura, says the Nod Yehuda, that until midday on Erev Pesach you can eat egg matzah. And if you paskin, or if you follow a posek who says you can eat it all day, Lo hifsid be'imhu l'tzorech tzad. You only require a little reason. For instance, I guess I'm trying to think what a little reason is. I don't have any food. I don't have anything. I have nothing else to eat. All I have is matzah shira. I can eat it. Afilu eino tzorech cholav v'zaken. Everybody seems to hold that somebody who is sick or somebody who is old and can't digest regular matzah on Pesach can eat matzah shira, right? So, but he's saying on Erev Pesach, you don't need that excuse. You can use whatever small excuse you have, right? And eat matzah shira on Erev Pesach. So that's the Nod Yehuda. The Shulchan Aruch Harav holds that we don't eat matzah shira after the beginning of a fifth hour. What does that mean? That means that we cannot eat matzah shira after the zman of bitul chametz, right? So what we call not biur chametz, so zman achilas chametz. Okay, you can eat matzah shira erev Pesach, says the Shulchan Aruch Harav, until the fifth hour. Rav Moshe Feinstein agrees that we don't eat matzah shira after sof zman achilas chametz. So the way to go seems to be that you can use matzah shira first for Friday night, Shabbat morning before sof zman achilas chametz, but not for Suda Shlishit. If one, and Rav Moshe says the following, Sheminhagenu hu shelo le'achol matzah ashira la'achas sof zman heter achilas chametz. Okay, that's what he says. We don't eat it after the zman, sof zman of achilat chametz. Now, what bracha do you make on matzah shira? What is matzah shira? Yes, we described it that it's chometz nuksha, but what bracha do you make? Do you make hamotzi? So, if you remember, or those of you who were listening in when we learned Hilchos Brachos, there's something called pas haba b'kisnin. Pas haba b'kisnin is something that's not made out of bread dough, but it is made out of dough, and often contains a filling or has something, etc. It's not technically bread, but it is something that you can be koveya suda. And we'll define shortly. We defined them, but we'll redefine what koveya suda is. So, for instance, when we were learning it, I suggested to you that, for instance, something like pizza is pas haba b'kisnin, or a donut of some sort, or it'll come to me, like a cheese-filled dough. What's that called? It's coming to me. It's moluach.
Borekas.
Borekas. Video. Borekas can be considered pas haba b'kisnin. Okay. All right. But you can only make hamotzi on pas haba b'kisnin when you are koveya sud on it. In other words, when you eat it as a meal. Okay? And I said to you at the time that pizza can be considered pas haba b'kisnin, but I think it's Rav Moshe who is koveya that you have to eat 2 slices of pizza. If you eat 2 slices of pizza, that's considered kfiyas suda. You wash on the pieces of pizza and you eat it, okay? In this situation, we're not eating pizza, right? In this situation, how much are we talking about? Some have estimated that kfiyas suda is the equivalent of 244 grams of the pas haba b'kisnin, okay? Others say that if it's an amount that people are used to eating as a meal, forget what it weighs or whatever it is, that's considered koveya suda. The Magen Avraham has a chiddush here that says that the amount does not have to be just the pas haba b'kisnin. In other words, let's say I eat borekas, and together with borekas, I eat some vegetables, all right? Or I eat pizza with something else, but can include other foodstuffs as well in the calculation. In other words, if we take, let's say, 244 grams as what kviyat suda is, you don't have to have 244 grams of the pat hababakisnin on Shabbos. You can have 150 grams of pat hababakisnin and 94 grams of something else. Okay. Marach Or Zorua, who was the grandson of the Or Zorua, who was Rabbi Yitzchak Mivina, who was one of the Rishonim, Paskins that the importance of Shabbos, in other words, Shabbos is so important that renders whatever amount of Pas Haba B'Kisnin that one eats as sufficient to be Koveya Su'uda. In other words, no matter how much Pas Haba B'Kisnin, I mean, not just a taste, but if you eat some Pas Haba B'Kisnin, says the Marach Or Zorua, you can be Koveya Suda because the Su'udot of Shabbos are a Chovah. And if this is what you choose to eat, then by definition, that is considered a Kviyat Shiur, a Kviyat Suda. He says, Shabbat Kovad, Shabbos sets it as a meal. Dafilu achilat arai chashiva keva lemaisa. On Shabbos, if I eat fruits that I have to give maisa from, right? It doesn't matter how much. There's no chiyuv to bring maisa if it's called an achilas aroy. Bonagid that I pick a fruit, right, on a day, and I eat it in the field. I eat one fruit, right? I don't pick a bunch of fruit. I eat a fruit. Do I have to give trumas and maisers? No, it's considered ochal aroy. It's like, a snack, and I don't have to give trumas and maisa. I can't pick the fruit on Shabbos, but I pick up an amount that would generally be considered an ochel arai of peiros on Shabbos. On Shabbos. Then that had to come from fruits upon which trumas and maisus are here. And then he goes on to say, nireh the gamli inyan pas habobekisnin, what we're talking about. Kol achila Shabbos chashiva keva kamola maisa. He compares the two. If I eat pas habobekisnin, right, no matter how much I eat on Shabbos, that's considered kviyah su'uda. I have to wash and make hamotzi. Okay, so the importance of Shabbos is koveya that it is a suda. So, in other words, the matzah shira, according to this, no matter how much I eat, I have to wash and I have to bench in afterwards. Rav Rimon, in his sefer, brings an interesting svara about this, and he says the following: Meharbe achronim, from many of the latter-day poskim, mashma shahagdorat hapat tluya b'minhago shalom. What do people eat? In other words, you go out and look, and you see, what are people eating? If they're eating this as kviyat suda, then it's kviyat suda. Umisibazu, as a result of this, yeshnam sfardim hamavachim birchat hamotzi al matzah rak b'pesach. Generally, the halacha is, I think Rabbi Barry paskins this way as well, for Sfardim, if they eat matzah all year round, they make a borei mina mizonos. Because people during the year are not koveya suda on matzah, only on bread. And only on Pesach, when matzah takes the place of bread, do you make hamotzi. Sha'az hi machlifa et halechem. Bread on Pesach is matzah, okay? V'lo b'shar yemos hashana. Lefi svara zu, if you accept this, yitachen she be'erev Pesach shechol b'Shabbos, when Erev Pesach is on Shabbos, kasher minhag ha'olam hu le'echol matzah ashira k'machlif le'lechem, when most of the world, or many people, eat matzah ashira as a substitute for bread, yesh levarech aleha hamotzi. In other words, the same way that regular matzah on Pesach is the machlif, is the stand-in for bread, because that's what we eat is bread on him. On Erev Pesach, we don't eat matzah. We don't eat bread. We eat matzah ashira. That's the stand-in. And by that definition, you wash on matzah ashira. Okay? Now, Rav Moshe Paskin, right, that if you eat pasabor bekisnin for one of the su'udot chova, one of the obligatory meals on Shabbos, you wash and bench. And he says the following: V'av she'ein halacha kamosim shelo b'kviyas hasuda mikol makom b'kviyas su'uda kahod su'uda Shabbos hamechuyavot. Generally, you don't wash unless you are koveya suda. But on Shabbos, since the meals are required meals, then by definition there's a kfiyat suda. Vaday tzorech levorech hamotzi. You certainly have to wash and make hamotzi. The gimel brachot, and you have to bench afterwards. Ukamafurish shekain roy lasos. Okay. There are different piskei halacha about this, and we'll go through some of them. I told you that the Maharil, who was a Talmud of the Maram Rutenberg, wrote a sefer about what, quote unquote, are the definitive minhagei Ashkenaz. So the Maharil says, sheyesh levarech borei mine mezonos al matzah ashira gam be'erev Pesach shechol b'Shabbos. He disagrees. He says, no, you don't wash on matzah ashira. It's pasabor b'kiznin, and you don't wash, you make borei minazim. V'chein das Rav Ovadia Yosef me'idach, and Rav Ovadia Yosef agrees that it's not bread, it's not a tachlif lebread, and you make borei minazim. Me'idach, on the other hand, b'shaydas ha'tshuvas ha'ratvaz, kosa b'mefura shaha'ochel matzah ashira b'Shabbos zu mevorech aleha motzi. The Radvaz, who is a commentary on the Rambam, says, no, on this Shabbos, you wash for egg matzah, for matzah ashira. V'chein gam kein pasuk gam b'shaylos and tshuva sigros Moshe, we just saw that. V'chein ola afmei Mishnah Brura, and so does the Mishnah Brura pasuk. Shebederech klal oklim biyachad im shor ha'ma'achalim kishiyu kviyas suda, like the Magen Avram. Remember what the Magen Avram said. The Magen Avram said, I can eat some matzah shira, and I can fill in with the other foods that I'm eating. Says the Mishnah Brura, that's true. That appears to be the halacha. Okay? Okay. Okay. The Maggid Mishnah makes an interesting point, which I want to get to in a moment. He says, there was a minhag extant. They were machmir. Don't leave any chametz after Friday and eat matzah shira. In other words, and what does that mean? So what that means is the following. And Rav Moshe Feinstein picks up on it. V'lachein tov la'elu, and therefore it makes sense for those, or it's good for those. She'ein rotzim l'haniach chometz ad yom HaShabbat, don't want to have any chometz in their possession on Yom HaShabbat. Mishum she'choshishim l'michsholim she'efshar lavo mizeh. They're afraid they'll get tripped up. They'll eat too late. They'll leave something. They won't get rid of it properly. Yekaimu mitzvah shtei asudos b'matzah ashira. The first two meals of the day, Friday night and Shabbos morning, eat egg matzah. Shekivan shekoveya alai suudos haShabbos yitztarech levorech hamotzi yabirchas hamazon, like we saw. Since your koveya suudot chova on egg matzah, you have to wash and you have to bench. Uchemuforish came b'veis Yosef. Shenachon lasos came. The Beis Yosef makes the same reference. Shekosav, and this is a quote from the Beis Yosef. Ve'ein lahakshos. Don't ask. Yavayer hakol milifnei Shabbos. Get rid of all your chometz before Shabbos. Velo yishayer klum. Don't leave anything over for Shabbos. Ub'Shabbos yochal matzah shira. And on Shabbos for the meals, eat egg matzah, says the Beis Yosef. The kivan she'ein sipuk b'dei kol adam lasot matzah shira lechoch shalosh hasudot o itrichu rabbanim. The reason that people don't eat it is because there isn't enough demand for it, so people don't make it or add it. Chazinin shahayaroi letaken ulahandig levhaya hakol milifnei haShabbat kedei shelo yavo ladei takala bi'im yishar mechametz. He says we see from this, as Rav Moshe, that it maybe would have made sense to make a takana that you should get rid of everything. In other words, when you burn your chametz on Friday, that should be the end of chametz, all right? So that you don't get messed up. Ulakayim mitzvahs hasudos b'matzah ashira, and therefore eat matzah ashira. Ach shelo atrachu rabbanan. Chazal did not make people do that. In other words, get rid of it on Friday and this and that. But it probably was a good idea, says Reb Moshe. V'lachein la'elu harotzim ve'efshal lahem latriach v'layafot matzah ashira l'shtei hasudot. Who are they? And for those who can bake matzah ashira or go out and buy matzah ashira for the first two sudot, they should do that. Af shesuda Shabbos hotzrichim lepashim avorchim alo hamotzi ubirchas hamazon. Although generally you need bread, which you make motzi on, and to bench on Shabbos for the meals. Elam mishum dekivan she'ochel osam lesuda Shabbos hamechuyavim b'pas. Says Rav Moshe, since you're eating the matzah ashira as a substitute for bread, that by definition, he says, is koveya suda. And if I do it with matzah ashira, I have to wash. I'm koveya suda, I have to wash, and I have to bench. Okay? That's how he sees it. One should remember that in this situation, in other words, if your minhag is, or if you intend to get rid of all of your chametz on Friday when you burn your chametz, if that's the last maga act that you'll have with chametz, and you're getting rid of all your chametz then you should say bitul chametz on Friday. You don't wait to Shabbos, but you say bitul chametz, on Friday, okay? One should finish eating the matzah ashira. However, you have to remember on Shabbos, among Ashkenazim, by the end of the 4th hour, right? Since Ashkenazim generally don't eat matzah ashira on Pesach, poskim say that it is better on Erev Pesach. If you don't eat matzah ashira on Pesach, then you shouldn't eat it on Pesach dishes. In other words, if your our minhag is not to eat egg matzah on Pesach. So what they're saying is, if you're going to eat matzah ashira, if you're going to eat egg matzah on Erev Pesach, you shouldn't put it on Pesach dishes. You should eat it on a chad pami, on a paper plate, a plastic plate, whatever it is, something that you're going to dispose of for those two meals, and you should not eat it on Pesach dishes. Next time we'll deal with the other possibility, which is to have real lechem mishnah, and we'll discuss how you deal with that and what you do. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Feel free to unmute yourselves. May I remind everyone that beginning this afternoon, we have Rabbi Lobel will be in shul at 5 o'clock for the sale of chametz. He'll be there this evening and tomorrow evening, Tuesday the 16th, and on Thursday evening. Thursday. Is that right, Bruce? Right. Okay. So tonight, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evening, Rabbi Lobel beginning at 5 o'clock, and he usually davens mincha with us, and he'll be around for a few minutes after mincha, I imagine. So please avail yourselves of his service.
Services if you desire. And just one further announcement about Rabbi Lobel: whatever money you give him goes to Kimcha de Pischa.
Right. Very good.
All right.
Well, thank you very much, Barry.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
So long.